All right, it is noon Pacific time on Monday, Valentine's Day. And I just wanted to say a special welcome to all our product hunters who might be joining us today. We'll also be recording this. So if you're watching it later, also hello. There will be a Valentine's Day theme, but just, you know, everyone needs a little love all the time, as do our products. Cool. I'll let people trickle in here. Just want to say, if you have any questions, feel free to post in the chat. I'll be taking a look at it as we go. Awesome. To give you an overview of the day, we're going to do a welcome and introduction, go through what is Candu, do some use cases, and then the latter half of this session will be hopefully really fun. We're actually going to go through and build the mom announcement banner that we talked about in our product hunt launch. So hopefully that's exciting for you. Then we'll take a look at how we can preview it in other apps using our preview Chrome extension. And it should just be a really fun session. So feel free, if you have a Candu login, I think it'll be more fun if you're logged in as well. The first 5 or 10 minutes, we'll just play around with the slide deck, but then hopefully we'll minimize that amount of content and get into it. Cool. Okay. Quick introduction of me. I'm Georgia. I'm doing product here at Candu. I've been here for over 2 years, so know a decent amount about the product, and I'm really excited to share it with you. And then my dog Ruggles is somewhere in this room with me. I think he's just snoozing, so he will just here to be cute. Cool. Okay, let's get into probably why you're actually here, which is what is Candu? What are we doing with it? The idea behind Candu is that it is a drag and drop web editor. I think a lot of these exist. Sometimes we get the like, how is it different than WordPress? How is it different than Webflow? Those are for building entirely new websites. What we saw as a whole in the market was that existing websites can't be edited besides by engineers. So a lot of existing SaaS or consumer websites that are pretty well established will often have very static things like home pages, or people will use pop-up tools because that's the only way that non-engineers have any access to the user experience. And we thought that was a problem. We think that there's a lot of places where customer teams can get really involved in the UI and actually add a lot of value. And it doesn't necessarily make sense for engineering to spend their time there because they're really trying to build your product to be, this differentiated, unique product, but the UI still matters. So we wanted to give more access to existing pages for users to update. The other thing that we won't spend a ton of time on today is with Candu, you can also democratize your front end and change the user experiences out depending on the person. So the example that I always use is that a new user coming into your site, like a product hunt user, doesn't know anything about it and probably needs an onboarding checklist, some welcome content, a really basic onboarding experience to focus them in on whatever the really one core value prop that will help them is. People who've been using your software for a year or 2 years, even 3 months, don't need that anymore. And what they want to see is, new product releases, or what the second thing is that they need to do, whatever gets them deeper into your experience. And so with Candu, because you can do segmentation, you can actually provide in the same space, so like a dashboard or announcement bar, you can provide different experiences for different people. And we'll actually see that today. Cool. Okay, let's talk a tiny bit about use cases. I think it's really exciting. We actually just launched a bunch of creator showcases that we're completely thrilled about. So if you are interested in this part or looking for inspiration, I highly recommend checking out our marketing website. Our customer success and marketing teams have put a ton of work into this, and I think it's super exciting. So feel free to take a look. But the first example I obviously want to bring up is how we're using it. So we've been building an onboarding checklist. The product hunt users had a different onboarding checklist than we typically show to other customers. So that's sort of fun to be able to experiment with, depending on how you come into Candu, you might see a different checklist. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think is really cool is that when we first got started, we were having this problem, which is that we required people to whitelist, which was basically a way to say it is okay to have Candu on your page, but people didn't know to do that. And so they were getting as far as installation, and then they were pinging us saying, this isn't working, my content's not showing up. And it's because they hadn't whitelisted, but they just weren't seeing that it was buried inside the checklist. And so, normally if you're going through an engineering process, you have to allocate points, you have to find a way to update the UI, to tell people, or you have to completely change the flow. And for us, because we were hearing this feedback and we wanted to try it, we just added another step that said whitelist and had a link. to the settings page where they needed to do that. And we saw a basically 100% reduction in support tickets on that topic. So pretty cool, it was fun. It's nice to be able to run those experiments for practically free, so you can find those things out a lot faster. Cool. Next, we have one of our early customers, Thought Industries. They used to have basically a static page that linked users to quarterly release notes, and it was maintained by their engineering team, and the engineering team would just update the link every quarter with different release notes. And it was a homepage, and it wasn't getting a whole lot of play because people would check it once a quarter and otherwise would skip right past it. And so they actually have a ton of really good designers, product education folks, customer success folks, product marketing. They have tons of teams that are trying to deliver content to users, and we're pretty limited. You know, they were using a lot of emails, these release notes, and they had all these external sort of like their LMS and all the other things they were trying to link people to, but people just weren't finding the content. So they had this sort of twofold problem. And so they decided to use Candu for a new homepage where the product education folks had a section, product marketing folks had a section, customer success had a section, and they can really update it whenever they want. And so they got a lot more engagement, a lot more play. As you can see, 100% plus increase in daily active users on the homepage, but also they got way more views of the content that they were creating outside of the app, in the LMS, in their product release notes, all these different places, because people could actually find it. They weren't, you know, ignoring their emails and missing it. It was actually getting to them at the moment that they were thinking about it. And so it really did increase, you know, traction in two different ways, which I think is great. Another one of our favorite examples is Gorgeous has been using Candu also to build a new homepage. As you can see here, this is one iteration. They change it pretty much constantly. You'll see at the top of the GIF, they're using variables to say your name and sort of your performance score, which has been motivating their users to try and up their performance score. It also encourages people to try new features, to get in touch with them, and to look at relevant blog posts. So they're actually using it to fully build a page and to do customization at the per user level, which is awesome. And then finally, I thought this one was relevant for today. Growflow had an issue, which is that they have they actually work in the weed business, doing helping companies sort of stay legally compliant. And they had a new compliance issue that was coming up in Oklahoma specifically, and they really needed their Oklahoma people to pay attention to what was going on and to make an update in 29 days. And so their CTO didn't feel like building custom announcement bars for different sets of users. And so they built one using Candu, so their designer could just build it. They did a countdown clock for those users. It got in their face. It only went to their Oklahoma users. And as soon as they'd finished submitting their credentials, the announcement bar went away. And so it was a really great use case for them to help users get the information they needed, get in their face without it being a pop-up that someone would just X out of right away. And they could update it and get rid of it. And now they use these announcement bars for holiday reminders and other things. So they've really been able to transition them to be useful in many different ways. Cool. Okay. I have just been speeding through this. This is 10 minutes of me looking at this deck. Want to double check. Okay. No chat. So hopefully that means this is all crystal clear. Cool. Okay. So let's get out of the deck. Let's stop having me just talk at you, and let's actually jump into the product itself. Excellent. Okay. So if you have a login to Candu, now is a great time to log in. We'll play around with it. We'll take a look at it. The first thing that you'll see is the home dashboard. You probably have a very similar looking home dashboard, but a little different. For example, I made myself a Valentine's Day announcement bar. My cat has heart eyes. It says my name. I love it. I think it's so cute. Right now I have the product hunt getting started checklist. If I check this off, the next step will open. This will be, if you don't want to watch the whole webinar, this is also a really cool way to get started. But if you're having any confusion, hopefully I can help you today. You can also see we'll have this announcement bar for the workshop that we're doing now. After this workshop, we'll update it with a link so you can watch it after the fact, little meta for you. And you can see all of these components here. Everything on this page, in fact, is built entirely with Candu. So if you're looking at something being like, oh, wow, that's really cool, it's built with Candu and you can build it as well. And if you need any help rebuilding any of these types of elements for your own page, let us know. We're happy to help you out. Okay, so that's an overview of something that we've built with Candu and what it actually looks like in real life. No custom coding on this page. The next thing that you would look at in the menu is content. Since we're going to spend 90% of our time there today, I'm actually going to skip that for now. The next thing you'll see is segments. Everything, for instance, why my announcement bar looks a little different than yours, or why maybe depending on how you're coming in, my getting started checklist might look different than yours, is because it's all segmented. We've created all of these different user segments using things like UTM params. We've used date logic. We sometimes use organization name or organization ID if we want to do something really specific. You can do all kinds of different things with segmentation. My Zoom screen is hiding it right now, but you can create a new segment. Demo segment. And you can leave a description for the rest of your team if you don't think you'll remember what it is. And then it's really just a series of if-then logic. And what you can choose from sort of depends on how far along you are in your Candu setup. So you can always use user IDs. You can always use first and last visit, and content is actually a date filter. So you can say, if, for instance, I wanted to post just a Valentine's Day post, I could just have something show on the 14th. And then the other things that I think are really valuable are user events or things that happen in Candu. So if a user clicks a button and then after they've clicked that button, you don't want them to see content anymore, you can make that happen with this segment. And the last one is user properties. So that's just kind of things that you actually pass into us. I have user properties set up through Salesforce and HubSpot. You can pass any contact properties to us. You can also use segment. You can also do a directly to installation. So if there are things that you're tracking about your users that would change the content that you want to show them, you can use segmentation to do that. Cool. And finally, users will show you any users who've logged on and seen your content. I haven't published a lot from this workspace, so I'm not going to see a lot here, but as more users come in, this is a really handy way to see who's seeing what. Cool. Okay, let's actually talk about content itself. As you can see, I've created a lot of content in this workspace, or a decent amount. All of the content I've ever created will be listed here with my last updated and status. One thing I really want to note for this set of users particularly is that we do have a template library. You can always create your own templates if you ever have content that you create that you want someone to be able to iterate off of. So you'll see I have saved templates. But also we've worked with our designer, we've worked with a bunch of our customers, we've even worked with a bunch of design partners to create some best-in-class templates that we think are helpful in different scenarios. And so we actually created one specifically for the product hunt launch. You'll see it when you first log in when you're going through our onboarding experience, but you can also find it here under announcement bar, product hunt. Cool. I'm actually going to start from scratch. I don't always recommend this. If it's your first experience with Candu, I actually think it is better to start with a template. Just if anything else, to avoid that sort of like, I don't know, blank page in your journal kind of feeling of feeling a little overwhelmed by the blank space. But just for the sake of demoing how content works, I want to start here. So mom announcement. Today we're going to build our mom announcement bar, and I'm actually going to make it Valentine's Day themed. I think, you know, given that it's February 14th, we'll have a little bit of fun with it. Cool. Okay, so here we're in the Candu editor for the first time. On the left, you'll see we have what we call here, you'll see down here, the palette. The palette is all of the options of things that you can drag onto the page to create your dream content. And you'll probably notice that when you look at my palette, all of these things look a little bit different than they look to you. We'll get into that in just a second. It has to do with the style guide. This section here in the middle of the document is the core of the content we're going to build. This is where we drag the things from the palette to create the content. This is the core drag and drop editor. And then you'll see over here on the right, we have what we call the toolbox. The toolbox is basically all of the levers that you can pull to make the content look exactly the way you want. So it'll change every element that you're clicking on. And it'll let you do things like responsive design. It'll allow you to set your layouts. It'll allow you to choose between elements. So if you want a heading 2 instead of a heading 1, all of that can be managed in the palette. Also, I know I've seen some people have a legitimate, nearly allergic reaction to this section because it looks like coding. All I can tell you about margin padding is that it should be in multiples of 4 and that you can experiment with it until it looks good. If you're an actual designer, that's awesome. You can do this perfectly. I am not an actual designer. I still can do it. You just type numbers in until it looks good. Totally fine. Cool. Okay, before we actually build the content, I want to take a couple more minutes to just look at what's at the top level of the editor. So obviously we're in the content section now. This is your home base. This is where you actually create your content. Always come back here. Analytics will be totally useless to me right now because my content is not published, as you can see. But once you actually publish content, you'll be able to see how many people are viewing it, whether they're clicking on your buttons. All of that information is available here. Users, similar to analytics, will populate with the people who have seen the content, give you more information. Mine has not been installed, so we don't see anything. Settings is sort of your basic stuff. Get that out of the way. And the style guide, which I think is one of the most exciting parts of Candu. I used to work at a big company and I regularly had to put together decks and reports and charts and graphs and all of those things. And every single day I had to pull up our 30 to 40 page marketing guide to try and remember our hex colors because I just couldn't keep them in my head for long periods of time. With Candu, you don't have to do that because you set them up once and then they are in here forever for you to play with. So I recommend, this is actually probably one of the first things that you should do, is go through and at least for one heading and one paragraph, add your fonts. You can also use custom fonts, add your colors, go through, add primary, secondary. You don't have to do all of them, but even just having a couple to play with can be really helpful. Maybe talk to your designer about it briefly. You can set up how links interact. You can set up buttons. You can always create new buttons too if you want to have white buttons with colorful backgrounds or vice versa. Badges we don't use quite as often, but also great. And then cards, you can create as many as you want. So you can create action cards that people can click on. You can change the shadow. You can change the cursor even. So if it's an action card, you can make it a pointer, whereas with a non-action card, you can make it so it doesn't have that. All of these are things that you can do. And obviously, if you're going to create checklists, highly recommend you can also do them as expandable drawers. There's tons of stuff that is made available to you through this style guide. I actually think it's really fun to set up. And once you set it up once, again, you don't have to set it up again. So save you a little bit of time as you're creating content. Awesome. Okay, let's go back to content and actually create an announcement bar. So I want to create my mom's announcement bar, which is going to be pretty simple. So the first thing I want to do is actually create a card that pops off the page a little bit. So I'm going to take an action card 1 and drag it onto the screen. Now you'll see I have my card. It says drag any element into this area. It's an action card. You'll also see part of the toolbox comes up into this contextual menu to make life a little bit easier. So I can add a link to my card if I want someone to be able to click anywhere on the card to do something. I can always delete it, copy it. I can change out what kind of card it is. And do your usual sort of right-click things. In the toolbox, I have even more options. I can do my content alignment, do my margin padding. I can also add a background color. So if I want to play around with this being sort of Valentine's Day themed, we can make it pink. For now, I actually think I'm not ready for it to be that bright, but intercom's blocking me, so that's fine. We'll go with pink today. So the next thing I want to do, so my vision for this card is sort of like the one that you saw on Product Hunt. So it'll be a big image on the left and then just like a little bit of text and a button on the right. There's a lot of ways you can pull this off. You can do it with a panel layout and make it go row orientation, but I actually want to play around. We recently released this new concept of columns. So I want to play around with the idea of using columns. So you'll see when I have right now, as I drag down onto the screen, I'm going to use my arrow key to go up to the top level of columns. You'll see I have 2 columns, and the toolbar on the right is where I'll see that. I can add a new column if I want to, but since I'm just playing with the 2, what I really want is for this second column to be like the majority of the size, because I just want a small image over here on the left. So I can just play around with that. I can also reduce it, and they'll go back to being sort of normal size. but I think 8 and 4 is probably like the ratio that I'm looking for. Cool. Okay, so next I want to add an image. So I'll go to media, I'll select image, and I'll drag it onto the page. Now, when you get here, there's a bunch of different ways that you can add images. The first is if you have linked content somewhere on the internet, if you just want to copy a link from Google image search, you can add that here. You can also upload by just dragging straight from your computer onto the screen. But in my case, I've actually already uploaded this image once, and everything you upload will be stored in your media library. It's searchable, it caches, so it will load pretty quickly. And you'll see I already created one of me and my mom, which is going to come in a little too big. And that's okay. That happens sometimes in Candu. And I think people get a little freaked out by that. They're like, oh my gosh, my content looks horrible. Totally fine. These things happen. What I'm going to do with this image is actually, I'm going to change it over here between pixels and percentages so that it actually just takes up 100% of the width of the column that it's in. And now it is an appropriate size. No panic necessary. What I might want to do ultimately is that I think this is probably a little big for an announcement bar. So I might switch back to pixels, and you'll see that it maintains the size that it was. So it's 400 pixels. I'm going to switch that to 200. And now it looks like a much more reasonable size. It's not taking up the whole column. So maybe I even make this column a little bit bigger. Let's go there so that the content's pretty close together. Another thing that I might do in this column is actually, you'll see all of my layouting options are right here. So instead of having it all the way left aligned, maybe horizontally, I'll center align it within its column. Cool. And then over here, I'm going to add some text, maybe a heading 2, which I'll drag onto the screen. Didn't drag that correctly. There we go. As you'll see right now, this column is structured in such a way that the heading is way up at the top. I think because my image is centered, I probably also want this one to be vertically centered and left aligned rather than stretching across the page. So I'm going to say, Happy Valentine's Day, and then maybe add an emoji. Who doesn't love those? There we go. And then I'll drag another bit of text on. These are the kinds of things my mom would say. XOXO. And then maybe a button that says call me, because whose mom doesn't want them to call them? We'll do a dark button so it pops off the page. And then something fun you can play around with. Like right now, I think this looks okay, not great. We could change the text color to be white if we wanted to. Or the other thing that we could do potentially is clear that and go back to the whole card being white and see how that looks. And then maybe change the button to be red. But these are all things that you can do over here. As you can see in the toolbar, or yeah, in the toolbox on the right, I can futz around with how exactly I want it to look until I get sort of a card that looks right to me. You know, maybe I want it to be red, maybe I want it to be white. All of those are things that you can control on a one-off basis. Now, I've been seeing we still don't have any questions in chat, so that's amazing. So the next thing I want to do is actually show you our preview functionality. I think it's really fun. It'll give you a sense. Right now, I'm just going to use the New York Times because I go there a lot. But hypothetically, what you should really use preview for is not testing what the content looks like on the New York Times, although you're welcome to create fake news if you want to. I don't recommend that. You should really try testing it out on the page where you actually want to install it. So like some page that already exists within your application. What you'll do is download the Chrome extension. If you just Google Candu Chrome extension, it'll be the first thing that pops up. And you'll see what pops up is all of this content, all the content you have. If you haven't created content yet and you still want to play with it, you can always test out our announcement bars. Right now, I just need to refresh the page really quickly. It's pulling up an old mom announcement bar. Just seeing a second. So we'll reopen this. There we go. There's my mom announcement. So we'll click on that. And what you'll see as I go over the page is that things will start highlighting in yellow or red. Red means I can't drop it there. It's not an appropriate div for me. Yellow means that it is available. So let's try here. And sometimes it doesn't work perfectly the first time, and that's okay. It is truly just a preview experience. No one can see it but you. And so you can play around with it and see, even if you hide the borders, you can get a better sense of how it looks on the page. I don't know if that's exactly what I'd be looking for, but I kind of think it's cute. Maybe I'd change the fonts in the style guide to make it look more like the New York Times, but this would be a great thing to send to my mom. I think she'd be very charmed by this. So hopefully you can play around a little bit in creating your own announcement bars and demoing it either in your product or in some third-party app. When you actually think about going to install, you'll see when I show borders, there's the option to embed content anytime. It requires you to do a quick script code to add it to your site. So you need to basically tell your site that Candu has permission to embed here. And once you've done that, you can embed it. So you can't actually go embedding it on other people's sites. You need access to the code to be able to do that. But it is just a simple 2-line script tag that you can add. So it should be pretty simple. And once that script tag's added, you can use preview to play around with what looks good. And then you can embed the content and publish it to your users or segment it. So you can publish it to just yourself or to just your teammates first. So basically endless flexibility is what I'm trying to say here. Yeah, and that's what preview looks like. Pretty exciting. Cool, let's take a look if there are any other questions. I'm not seeing any, in which case we can actually wrap up a tiny bit early today. Honestly, please follow up with us. We love working on this kind of stuff. We love working on helping you build custom announcement banners, usually slightly more business oriented than the one that I just built. But hopefully this was fun for everyone. I think it's always great to be able to experiment with your UI and not think of it as this lockdown thing that can only be updated every multiple quarters when your engineering team has time. Truly, it should be more democratized. There's tons of content that we can be passing to our users that actually really helps them, that's currently buried, that we can help bring to the fore. So please, we're so excited to have launched with Product Hunt and to be getting your feedback. So please play around with it and let us know what you think. In the meantime, happy Valentine's Day. Enjoy the day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.